Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 48 of the Titanforge Podcast. My name is Dratnus, joined by Tettles.
What's up, Dratnus? Hope you're having a great week. Happy birthday.
Thank you. And Trell.
Happy birthday, Dratnus.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about we've got actually, this is a pretty meaty topic that Tettles came up with, which I think is a really good one. We're going to talk about how to play the Awakened affix best. So how best to actually play the Awakened enemies on their obelisks, and also how best to play the Awakened enemies with the last boss, which those are both things that I think we all see done wrong a lot of the time in Pugs.
Okay. You want to know why I picked this?
Why?
Because I was pugging on my hunter, and a tank did not tag Urgroth at all, immediately left away, and I was like, this has got to stop. No more.
I've seen that too. I think that's a good idea to address that.
I think we addressed part of this like in the PTR cycle. Like we addressed it very loosely, how to play obelisks with final boss, like how to know what you were going to be playing. But I think it's probably time for a revisit now that everybody has good perspective, and there's a pretty strict meta for how some of this stuff works now.
Yeah, and we have some really good ideas about what different comps can do with different bosses on different weeks. So it's going to be a pretty good show, I think, for people who want to learn more about Mythic Plus. We've also got some MDI news to recap, which we'll get to in a bit. But that's really exciting because we got a big tournament coming up this weekend that I actually can't wait for this weekend's.
You wanna give us your drat math?
Sure. Okay. So
Trap math.
Coming up this weekend, we've got there's two teams that are locked to make. So there's 4 invites from each region, and we've got the last EU Cup coming up this weekend. 2 teams are already locked: Method and A and Perplexed. And then we've got 2 teams. Then there are 4 teams fighting for the remaining 2 slots realistically. So Deplete from Beyond and the boys have a pretty good chance. If they can get a 3rd place finish, they probably make it. Or they almost definitely make it. And a 4th place finish also probably makes it for them. 5th or 6th place, they might get involved in a big tie. And then we've got Self-Reliance and Paint for Femme, who are looking for a 3rd place finish. And a 4th place finish probably results in a tie for them. Anything below that, and they're probably not getting there. We also do have 2 new teams that are the 7th and 8th seeds coming in this weekend, which is pretty common. We've had that, a new 7th and 8th seed the last 2 cups as well for EU Cup, so those kind of cycle in.
I think that's cool, by the way.
They don't really have much of a chance to make it to the finals, given they've only played 1 cup. But there is a very convoluted sequence of an exact outcome for each team. So if one of those newcomer teams wins the tournament, spots 2 through 4 go to Method EU, Perplexed, and the other newcomer team. Spots 5 and 6 go to Paint for Femme and Self-Reliance, and spots 7 and 8 go to Deplete from Beyond and the boys. Then there will be a 5-way tie for the 4th invite to the tournament. Or actually, the 5-way tie for both of the two last invites there.
So not happening. Oh, so
there's a chance.
There is a chance.
Anda and Mikkel from Self-Reliance are in the chat right now.
Okay, yeah. So, if any one of those outcomes doesn't happen, those new teams aren't making it to the finals. But still, there is a chance. So that's going to be really fun to watch. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty hype weekend. I think this is probably the closest fight for tournament qualification slots we've seen since NA, or since West Cup at the end of last MDI season, which was fairly close, but even then that was a little bit less. Like here, there's really 4 teams fighting really close for 2 slots. Okay. Let's advance through our show though. Tettles, would you like to read our patrons today? I feel like I've been talking a lot the last 5 minutes.
Okay, I can absolutely read our patrons today. All right, so big shout out to all of our patrons. Paul from US Proudmore, King of Scales, VTech XD, Zuku, Ja, Drunk Sweet from Legion of Lemons, Argent Dawn EU. I wish I was Dratnus' Dino Pillow. Thanks, Tettles, Heltari, Ishio, Andrew number 1, Chrome, Seraphicus, Trekkie, the Marsh Hare, Regulus, Never Knew, Chewy, a newbie.
Here, I got it. A new Laureate Trellina.
Okay, thank you so much. Pelion, who ran out of jokes for segment, Cocogs Gopher, Worgen Monk Win, Dratnos' main basement captive, Ryton of the Guild of Terran Mill, recruiting mage and warlock. Kaylan wants to have Dratnos' babies. Congratulations,
Okay.
Dratnos. Vio have my kids. Shout out to, that is Roman numerals. Is that 69? Shout out to the 69 orange team.
How did you do that Roman numeral so fast, Tuddles?
I don't know.
LXIX.
Scenaria and Daz Boot, the 7th best mage in guild.
Das Boot.
Hey man, there's...
All right, Tuddles is banned from reading the Patreon.
Yeah, next week we'll make Charles do it. All right.
I love that. I love that I got slowed down less on the Roman numerals than I did the
elf.
one. Yeah.
All right. So let's get into our show. We were just talking a little bit about the EU MDI, but we can talk a little bit about the NA MDI, which happened last weekend. So Method NA won again. That's now 4 for 4 cups won by a Method team. But once again, the top 4 here is really close. Tettles, how do you feel about the fact that neither Method NA nor Method EU has yet to lose a match?
Okay, I'm actually kind of surprised. For what it's worth, I feel like there are a lot of really good teams that have been giving them very close matches. So the fact that they haven't been on the wrong side of an outcome of a match that we would probably put, like, what would you say some of those matches are, like 60-40 in their favor, 70-30 in their favor? The fact that they haven't got like the 30% outcome is kind of surprising. They definitely are the best team, but the fact that they haven't lost a match or a tournament yet will be surprising to me.
Method NA also has done some really impressive multi-stratting for dungeons. Last weekend we saw them do, where they would just play a route that was optimized for like whatever team they were up against. So they would play, 3 obelisks against weaker teams and 4 obelisks, big kite strategies against the stronger teams. So those were a little bit riskier strategies, but a little bit faster so that they'd have a better chance of actually beating the stronger teams. I thought that was a really cool thing that they were doing.
I thought that it requires a lot more time than basically any other team can put forth, but I did think it was an interesting strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know, Charlie, you've done MDI practice before. Like how much extra work would it be to like have different strats prepared for a dungeon depending on like, what team you're up against?
Well, let's say if you've learned the boss fight with all 4 obelisks and then you just suddenly switch to 3, it doesn't really require any practice at all. It's just easier. But if you're going from 3 to 4 one week, I think that requires like double practice. Yeah.
Okay, well, one of the notable things that Method NA did is the difference was kiting 4 versus playing 4.
Right.
It wasn't going from 4 to 3. It was going from 4 to 3 for some of them, but it was kiting 4 versus playing 4, which is a fundamental difference in like where you're getting your trash count, because one of those involves cannonball barraging a middle pack and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, that was in free.
Well, I think it definitely doesn't require as much practice as like doing all 4 with the boss. But since they've done it before, I think they've done it before in some way, right? In a previous cup, or was that the first time?
We'd seen them do they've done some kiting, yeah. They hadn't, I don't think they did freehold.
No, that was the first one. No, that was the first kiting that we saw, because in first NA Cup, the only team that kited obelisk was Ethical.
Oh, right.
And that was Natal.
Fair enough.
Gotcha. It might have taken a lot of the time then, yeah. There's a lot of like weird challenges with making that strat work, like especially if it's grievous or if the tank healing is close with the healer's healing with threat, as you saw. I think that wiped Perplexed. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that it can go wrong. So like if the hunter feigns for any reason, I think that causes the threat that they misdirected to disappear while they're feigned. And that can cause the thing to snap back.
Mikkel confirmed that was not true. So okay. I think what we've seen is you have to balance tank threat really heavily whenever you're kiting obelisks.
Yeah,
and it's just if you ever health potion, it's like all bets are off.
Okay,
so the problem is once the healer leaves, it's hard for them to take damage without A, snapping the mobs, or B, like getting into melee range of the mobs that are chasing them. And so they kind of have trouble generating any threat like once they're out of the boss arena, right? So people have to start at low health and then they have to generate as much healing threat as they can while the rogue or hunter is tricksing them. And then the tank has to just like hold off on their healing abilities as much as they can until they have to use them.
Yeah,
It's pretty hard actually. There's some little secret challenges to do with that one.
Yeah, when we're watching on the stream, it's just like it teleports back, and we're not really sure exactly what happened, but definitely very.
There's a lot more nuance. There's a lot more nuance to it than just the kiting of the obelisks. Having to shadow meld it at like specific percentages to make sure that you don't gen enough threat as the tank. Apparently, you cannot last stand either because that's
that comes with a big upfront heal. Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay. Also, we do have word from Blizzard that the Ring of Booty is supposedly fixed, where the flailing sharks supposedly don't move too quickly anymore. But apparently this is still bugged for Unholy Death Knights,
Which is like the main culprit.
Yeah.
Well, wait, who would they fix it? If they didn't fix Epidemic, or is it Outbreak?
Know. It's Outbreak.
It's Outbreak.
If they didn't fix Outbreak, then what would they even fix?
I don't know. But I've heard people say that Outbreak was still broken on this.
Yeah, Hunters bug it in some way, I think. I can't remember.
Tar Trap can do it, or could do it.
I think it's Tar Trap. But yeah, Outbreak is the major culprit, and it's still not fixed.
Well, also pets. Like, if the shark gets, like, thrown right on top of pets, it, like, breaks it, too. So Death Knight, double thumbs down.
yeah, that you see it happening quite a lot, actually. Okay.
Every MDI match, I watch it happen.
More MDI news here. Not this weekend, but next weekend when we get to the NA Cup again, we will have a new team that is attempting to qualify for that cup through time trials.
Oh, this is gold.
This is, I believe, the best news I've ever seen. Announcing ramping MDI team for NA Cup number 3 with Method Roger, Jeeth, Mini, special guest Limit THD Lock, and Nagi. This is the first MDI team to have a coach. Method Mirez will provide special insight and strategies. All practice and time trials and memes live on Twitch. And then they have this beautiful image here.
Can you imagine if they, like, were, like, really good?
I mean...
Okay,
I bet they make the cup. I'm going to really enjoy watching
I bet they make the cup. Making the cup is... I don't know. Making the cup is just an amount of time that you need to commit.
Yeah, if you have realistic goals, I think you can make it into the NA Cup as like a group of skilled players.
I'm surprised that they didn't name their team Method EU.
Ramping
as long as they don't go
name.
for like the number 1 time runs, which require a ton of practice to do the polls. If they go for like medium timed runs, they're just going to make it into the cup, and it's going to be fantastic.
Dude, THD came into my chat last week and was putting those chart with upward trends emojis into my chat without explaining why. Now I know what was going on. They must have started this team back then. This is so funny. So this is technically an NA. This team can technically play an NA, even though it's 4 raiders with methods, a European raiding guild, because Jeeth and Mini are Americans, and so is THD. So that's 3 out of 5, which is
nice.
What is THD gonna play?
I hope he plays Warlock.
Oh man, I hope he plays Warlock. I don't know. He's played like TH Demon on. I mean, sure he can just play anything. He's played a Death Knight as well.
I'm sure he'd be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a world first raider. He can do it. All right. Let us advance to our tip of the week segment. So my tip of the week comes for all aspiring Holy Paladins out there, and this is a little known Holy Paladin ability that even some top players don't use to get some extra healing out of their parses. So this is an ability called Beacon of Light, and if you use this, you'll get some free extra healing onto your target here. And the reason I've picked this as my tip of the week here, if you take a look at Dark Inquisitor Zanesh parses on Mythic, you see this top parse here comes from Evil Inari in my guild. And if you click on this and go into his healing, you'll notice there's not any healing from Beacon of Light in here. That's because he forgot to put one of those out here before getting the top parse on Zanesh yesterday. So try not to do that. There's some weak auras you can find.
Right. Let me say, if this doesn't prove that healing parses are actually just the most bogus shit ever, nothing else ever will. That is like 15% healing that he's losing, by the way.
Maybe it's a good thing for parsing because his beacon wasn't making his glimmer overheal.
That's true. Yeah, it helped him not be overhealing as much. But But yeah, that is the story of how this parse here has no beacon of light healing in it. All right.
That is a flame of the week, not a tip of the week.
It's a tip, man. It's a good tip. If I told him that tip, he would have done 30k more HPS before the poll. All right, Trell, what is your tip of the week?
So my tip of the week has to do with this week's epic because in Siege of Paralysis, we were having a discussion in our Titanforge Discord earlier today about the spotters in Siege and how to use a bolster spotter. So if you're going into Siege and you wonder, I should probably use a spotter this week, but what do I do with it? You basically want to get to the third spotter in the dungeon, which is the one before Hadal Dark Fathom, the third boss. Use it to kill the snipers. And after that, it's got 4 bolster stacks. So where do you go from there? You usually want to do at least 2 packs behind the route where you're going, and then continue on into the commander area. Those 2 packs that you do initially aren't 2 packs. I don't have any lieutenants that get mega bolstered. But in the Hadal room, there's 2 horsemen that get bolstered to death. So you got to either pull the packs one at a time and just hold off on killing the mobs with the spotter until the commander's either dead or low. Or you can pull it all, master all the little mobs, pull the commanders away, kill the commanders first, and then go back and kill all the little mobs one shot. It gets really convoluted, but the part I wanted to share the most was if you want to not have to wipe to the spotter or spend a lot of time killing it after the trash, you can actually just hold it during the Hadal boss fight, root it in the boss room, and then run to the last boss, and it'll bug out and it won't be able to get to you. So you won't have to ever deal with it again, and it'll reset itself. And I think I did that a month ago, and I haven't told anyone about it, but I think it could be a really good meta strategy.
Yeah, the strategy I've been using against this is to just you just kill that whole room with spotters, and then you have a 30 stacks of bolstering on the spotter, 10 on each of the commanders, and you just wipe, and then run back, and that removes the bolstering as well.
Of course, if you're Alliance, all 5 players can shadow meld if you have that availability, which hardly anyone does. But I think it's really good. There's a lot of parts in this expansion where if you just seclude a mob at a faraway spot, they just can't get to the group ever again.
Yeah,
because of all the debris on the ground. So you can actually use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a hunter and a rogue, if you have a bunch of people who can actually vanish off combat, it may be in your best interest to just have a full team wipe and then or have 3 people die. You burn a battle res and then your healer stands up and just masses everybody. It may be worth to do that. It kind of depends, just what you're doing.
Yeah, mass root really strong
Sure,
in there
it's an option.
though for the mass root and kill the stuff that won't die to the spotters first.
That is true.
All right.
Yeah, take the horses downstairs.
Yeah. All right, Tettles, let's take a look at your clip of the week from Operation Mechagon here from Mode's Disc Priest stream. This is a really cool thing here. The mind control on the Tinkerer, and then you can use the squirrels against the enemies.
Yep.
You watch the... yeah. It just does huge damage.
Okay, so not only does that do freakish damage, it does actually just the most insane damage. But whenever you actually break a mind control, then you have wild threat on top of the Tinkerer. You need to know that you're going to have... the tank is going to require almost two
taunts.
Yeah, to be able to gen threat back off of you. So you have to be very aware of what's going to happen with that.
Yeah, that's a crazy mechanic. I've been trying to figure out how that works exactly for a long time, and I think they reset threat on their mind controller 4 seconds after it breaks or something. It's so weird.
Yeah, it's huge amounts of threat that you gain after mind controlling. So very much something to watch out for. Very cool strategy though. The squirrels there. That's part of the reason that Mode has just been blasting the scoreboards on that Disc Priest.
5K IO Disc Priest. So if you guys want, go check him out. Mm-hmm. Does some weird shit like that. I would have never known to mind control a Tinkerer, I will admit.
Yeah, and the fact that you can mind control kind of just every 5 seconds and fire out a new squirrel. It's not like something you can only do once every 30 seconds. Pretty wild.
Yeah, it's really cool.
All right, so let's get into the meat of our show today. Awakened mobs. Figuring out which awakened mobs to play. So I guess let's start off by kind of setting the stage for how Awaken works, right? Because there are the 2 different Awaken patterns. In some dungeons, it's not a big deal, but in some, it actually is a pretty big deal because so every week, 2 of the obelisks are always fixed between both the patterns, and 2 of them will rotate between the A and B patterns, and the A and B pattern flips every 14 days. So you get a Tyrannical and a Fortified week of each pattern, and then it flips for the next 2 weeks to the other pattern. Tettles, is there anything big about that is worth noting?
I mean, in my experience, A week is a little bit better than B week. Just generalized obelisk placements like across the board. I can think of some like Mother Load is slightly better on an A week. I think Underrot's slightly better on an A week. I think that Ataldazar is also slightly better on an A week. I think all three of those just come to mind. All in all, it's like not that big of a deal whether or not it's A week or B week. More often than not, it's going to involve the final boss as like a final piece to the puzzle. But I think A is like slightly better.
Yeah, so
across the board.
It really doesn't matter if you're fighting all 4 obelisks, right? Because you're just gonna fight them anyways. So it just changes when you fight each awakened mob. But if you're trying to fight one awakened enemy with the last boss, it can really matter where that obelisk is in a few dungeons in particular. Because in a few dungeons there are like easy obelisks to skip. So, for instance, Ataldazar, there's the one by Volcall.
Like mainly Atal.
Yeah, Volcall, the one next to the double honor guard pack near Volcall. That one is either the spider or the blob. And depending on your group composition, those are both potentially doable with Yasma, but they're different. They're very different. It's not something you can just kind of slot in the same groups always.
Okay, so I misspoke. Underrot B week is better. Blob with last boss is the one that you're probably going to be playing.
Yeah, so Underrot, it's that other one that's out of the way, the one that's near the like the worms and the stuff.
It's Blob versus Fear are the two that you'll play in Underrot generally.
Mm-hmm. And usually the Blob is the easier of those. Blob, one of the easiest ones to fight with a lot of those end bosses. So that can matter whether it's the A week or the B week. That is something you need to look at where those spires are. But assuming you're just playing the enemies with the obelisks, it's not actually usually that big a deal because you're just going to go and activate all 4 of the obelisks anyways. So let's start by talking about how to do each of the 4 awakened enemies on their spire, because there are some tips and tricks for each of these that I think are really, really worth knowing about. So let's start with Blood of the Corruptor. This is the one that spawns the 4 eyeballs as well. Kettles, what's the big first tip for this one?
Dude, okay. I've seen so many people troll this mob. There are multiple ways that you can do that. But okay, so first and foremost, the blood I believe starts off with blob bait for the puddle, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so it starts off with blob bait on the puddle, and then it goes to player bait. You can kill all 4 of the eye stalks wherever they spawn. That is a totally viable strategy. But don't cover up all of the eyeballs, and then half the group runs away, and then half the group stays. The eyeballs fixate on the nearest target for their channel, and if you have all 4 on you, you're probably going to die almost immediately. So if you're going to commit to killing them where they stand, you also have to run away at the exact same time together to be able to line them.
Yeah, so
there is a Okay, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
Basically, just that they the common strategy for these is to run in line and have them all teleport to your group, right? But
exactly,
if you do this, if half of your group does this and half of your group doesn't, it's not going to work, right? You're just going to have them kill your 2 people that stay back or your 1 person that stays back.
Okay, so alternatively, all 4 people have to enter at the exact same time. You have to run in sync if you're going to move immediately. That's the case for all 4 obelisks. That's not some unique strategy just for the blood. You have to run as 4 if you're going to immediately run away, or as 5 if you're going to immediately run away. There is a really easy way to deal with the Blood of the Corruptor, and it's really just finding a nearby line of sight spot. Then you send in a player like a rogue or a tank in. They immediately run to that line of sight spot by themselves. Nobody else is coming in yet. Then all of the eye stalks teleport pixel perfect right on top of one another, and then right before they even teleport, you can start entering in. Your tank can generally call it. They know whenever it's going to happen. And then everybody enters in. You use AoE stuns and everything to be able to blow them up immediately. You make sure that you get the Blood of the Corruptor off of the eye stalks. Make sure you player bait away from them. And with them being stacked up as 4, it's really easy to just kick and stun and just disrupt them. That's the fastest way of dealing with it. If it is Sanguine, it's a bit rougher because you can just heal them up, but you have to I think there should be some level of stacking the mobs up.
Yeah, especially so depending on your group composition as well. If you've got a fire mage combusting on the blood, you really want to make sure that you're going to get the ignite spreading to each of the 4 eye stalks as well. So that's
Yes.
something where if you're not going to teleport them, you want your tank to bring the blob around to each of the 4 stalks as well to spread the ignite. That's something that will really speed up how fast that it takes for you to kill those eye stalks.
But yeah, if you're not going to teleport all 4 of the eye stalks, you absolutely just have to stand there and kill them all by themselves. Like letting somebody get trapped behind, I've seen it happen so many times because there's also a slow component to the eye stalk is so bad. Like make sure your warriors have heroic leap up, make sure your DKs have a Lightfoot potion available.
Yeah,
or something.
Another thing to know about is that alternating thing you're talking about. I think a lot of people don't really keep track of this, but the blood does alternate between dropping the pool beneath itself and throwing 2 at random players in the group. And it always alternates between those 2. So like Tettles is saying, having somebody like call out which is going to happen next, or just being aware that like you are baiting pools under you, you can do a really bad job and quickly pollute the entire area you're trying to fight in if you're not aware of it.
Temple of Sethralus is I found has like the easiest way to, or like the Freehold Bridge are probably the easiest ways to pollute the area that you're running in, just because those are narrow corridors where those obelisks are placed. Because like Waycrest Manor, you normally take that blob downstairs. Like, so either making sure you're stacked up as 5, basically just do not bait in front of the group. Like you either are off to the side just a little bit of the group, or you're stacked up. You can't, like, being behind is also a really easy way to get trapped behind all the pollution.
Yeah, don't be behind or ahead of the group. Just be with the group or to the side of the group.
Or to the side. Yeah, you can absolutely be to the side, or like way far away as well. Like something like King Mechagon. Like if you're playing King Mechagon with the blob, players can stand in the middle of the room, and then the tank and the rest of the group will probably take the blood just like in a circle around the room. It's fine for you to stand in the middle. There's nothing wrong with that.
Also, if you're in a pug group and you're the tank, I think what you should do when you enter the slime obelisk is you just pull it to the side initially, because the first one is always going to be underneath the slime. Just drop the big puddle to the side and then move it back into the tentacles after that, so the group just has less of a chance of taking damage to the ground effect.
Yeah,
it's not always time to like coordinate all the movement and positioning of that kind of encounter, especially with a new group of players.
Yeah, another thing you can do with it, if you need to move the blob long distance, sometimes this happens in like Toldagor or Waycrest, is you can do like a couple of snaps or teleports of those eye stalks and DPS a couple of them down each time, and then just keep moving and teleport them again.
And that's why it's like fundamentally important for you to be able to like. So it's like what I was talking about whenever you have the tank enter in and like stacking up the eye stalks. There's also a way that you can do it. I'm thinking in Toldagor, like Dratnos just saying, you can have 4 people already in the realm, and say you send your rogue in like on the far side to activate the pillar by himself. He can then like grapple away and vanish off the aggro from the eye stalks. The eye stalks will immediately teleport all the way. All 4 of them will teleport to the other group member. The tank is just responsible for grabbing the blood off the rogue at that point, because the blood has true sight. And then you're able to just like blow up the eye stalks. Whenever you're playing the obelisk with the blood of the corruptor, the eye stalks are number 1 priority.
Yeah,
definitely. I think it is worth, though, in a coordinated group, you should want to have damage on the blob at all times. So like that's the biggest time save, if you can also hit the blob while cleaving the tentacles. And so if you have any class in the group like a Shadow Priest, it's probably worth just getting some initial dots on the tentacles, then getting some more damage on the tentacles when they teleport, keeping damage on the blob as you go, and just like keeping the cycle going as you kite around corners or get back into other rooms out of range of the tentacles.
Yeah, it really depends on like how much space you have to kill the thing and what affixes are active as well. But that's part of the reason that we teleport those eyeballs, is that when they spawn, they're often not in cleave range of each other. So you need to teleport them so that they get into cleave range of each other and you're not inefficient while killing them. Okay, up next is Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes, the tank buster. Tettles, you had a little rant that you previewed earlier. Do you want to go on it again?
Dude, okay, so as the tank player, you absolutely have to start DPSing Urgroth before the Malignant Growth spawns. Like, okay, so your tank should 100% be the first person into the Spire. If any DPS enters the Spire before the tank, you are trolling, you're probably going to get hit by the Brutal Smash. Like, first things first, let your tank enter the Obelisk first. I think that's for every single pillar, but like, even more so for here. Secondly, your tank needs to generate threat on Urgroth before leaping away. He should not be like horsing away or heroic leaping or infernal striking or just running the hell away from these Malignant Growths or Urgroth. before he has threat, because at that point he's going to be able to like lose everything to your DPS, because it's so hard to predict as a DPS that your tank is going to just leave with 0 threat.
Yeah, it's definitely the play. Like if you're going to outrange the growths, which is good, what you should do is you taunt the mob as soon as you see him. You throw 1 ability at him, or 2 if you have time before you run through the growths. Like on my monk, I would taunt, keg smash the same global, and then I would blackout strike the next global, and then I'd roll away after that. On any other tank class, you can substitute those 2 abilities with something, but as long as you get some threat in your taunt window, you should be fine.
Yeah, try and land a nice Twilight Devastation in your taunt. That's a really good tip for that. That's a big move.
I mean, people won't be able to put a lot of damage into it if they're also running away. It's usually just someone with the dots or some builder that they need to put on the mob to keep their stacks up of something. Like a hunter keeping their barb shot stacks up is probably what Tettles did, and then he died.
Oh, I beamed him and immediately died. Like immediately with threat. I was like, what the fuck did he not? I was like, did he not touch the mob? I was like, what just happened?
So yeah, I mean, if your tank does do a reasonable job here, they're still going to be light on threat. You still do have to be careful to not, like, you know, blood of the enemy, fell barrage.
Oh yeah, you're not popping off offensive cooldowns into it, because okay, so you don't really want to be DPSing the malignant growths. You want to be running away from them just as quickly as possible. I'm also pretty sure that it's not 60%. I think it probably scales the key level. The slow.
It does feel really slow in high keys.
It feels real bad. But yeah, like you really don't want to be DPSing those. You would rather just like run through them, use mobility. Some things that you can use are like Freedom or Tiger's Lust to be able to help some of your slower classes get out of there. Or Freedom, if you're a pally, you just use it on yourself because you're the slow class.
Mm-hmm. That's advanced.
So in conjunction with that, Tiger's Lust removes 1 root, like the one time it's used. So as long as you don't come out of the growth debuff, you're able to run all the way through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's post haste works like that as well. The disengage thing for hunters, although they usually don't play that in Mythic Plus because it's on the binding shot row. But yeah, there are things that will like clear a root, and that means as long as you stay with that debuff, it's not going to be rooting you. But if you step out and back in, it reapplies. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the sync up between the Spirit Breaker and the Dark Fury, because Dark Fury will not be delayed. Like, Dark Fury is happening even if your tank is out of range. Spirit Breaker can get delayed until it's actually in range of a threat target, right?
Right. It kind of naturally syncs up to be in a good spot if you do the strat where you outrange the growths as you go into the pillar, because he tries to Spirit Breaker like 1 second into his own combat cycle. But if you do it, if you kind of like we were saying, and then he gets to the very last growth in his path and then tries to Spirit Break you, that makes it so it's immediately in front of Dark Fury. And that means he's not going to try to melee you at all while you have the Spirit Breaker debuff. And that's why it's so good. You don't have to use like any extra defensives for Spirit Breaker than you would normally have to.
Right. So the even though like a common thing is if you kite too much, you're going to get Dark Fury, then Spirit Breaker will be the cast sequence. But it's much more favorable if it's Spirit Breaker than Dark Fury, because you do just get that free reset without having, like, you get to not actually be taking any damage during the debuff as a result of that cast sequence. Okay, other tips for this thing. There are a lot of ways that DPS players and healers and stuff can provide you assistance during the this part as a tank. So like Hunter pets, Warlock pets, Boomkin trees, they can all taunt the Dark Fury or the Spirit Breaker, and that can be really big, depending on what you want to do here.
It can also be really bad in some cases as well, because if the trees of the Hunter pet or the Warlock pet are taunting it during the Dark Fury cast, the Dark Fury circle and the animation for it can bug out and make it be not where it appears and can kill your group off. So if you are using trees or Hunter pet or Warlock pet to be able to taunt frequently, make sure your melee DPS players are running out a little bit more and being a little bit more cognizant and conservative on their run, because if they die, they're going to be pissed and they're going to be like, oh, fucking trees. But like, if you tell them in advance, they can't get mad.
Theoretically.
I mean, they don't die. Like, actually just walk out further.
All right. Let's move on to fighting the Spider, Voidweaver Malthier. So this one is one that it comes with those 5 scarabs, the explosive scarabs, and it can be a little bit of an interesting question of like, should you put any damage into these things or not? I think that generally it's it's not that important to kill them. Like usually if you just ignore them and DPS the spider, you can just get to the end of the spider fight with all of them exploding naturally.
Those scarabs have some kind of like out of combat timer where they will queue up their first explosion, sometimes like right as you enter the pillar, and sometimes like 10 seconds after you enter the pillar. And so it's like, I don't know, some mobs seem to have some kind of a alternating timer once you engage them instead of just like the moment combat starts. So you gotta be careful. As soon as you enter the pillar, all 5 scarabs will like run to you, and then sometimes you have to outrange an explosion right then. So be sure to kick quickly if that's the case.
Yeah, one of the really cool things you can do, if you know any snap spots for the spider, is that'll basically just mitigate that just kills the scarabs, right? Like snapping the spider 50 yards just kills the scarabs.
Okay. I've seen tanks do the same shit with Void Weaver Malthier as they'll do with Urgroth, where it's like they try to line like they try to move the mob first and then kill it second. Whereas like with Malthier and Urgroth, like ideally you're moving it while DPSing it. It's not like they want you to line Malthier all the way to a spot and then you start your kick rotation. Whereas like you should be lining Malthier at the very end just to try to get it moved and like stop DPSing it like sub 15, sub 20%, and then you line it and move it. Not like you just take it to the spot and then start DPSing it. That's just a waste.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to establish threat, get like at least 2 to 3 kicks on it, and then move if you want, or continue to fight it for a little bit and just move as you go. But I don't think running as 5 and going far away right off the bat is the play, like Tettle said.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's something that catches me off guard whenever the whole group just yeets out of there, and I'm like, wait.
Or like, oh, dude, it caught me. Okay, because if not all 5 people move immediately, that one person who gets left behind is going to get just blasted into the ground and they just die. I had it in like a temple pug where the tank just ran all the way down the stairs, not DPSing Malthier at all. And I sat there and was just like, there's no way this is optimal, right? Like, sure, you're going to have to line Malthier at the very bottom of Avatar of Sethros to get her into the room at the very end, but it doesn't have to be at the very beginning.
Right, because the thing is you can efficiently, like, you can lock it out on both of its schools and move it, 5 or 10 yards for free while DPSing.
I mean, once you run out of kicks, like, sure, like run and line away, like run away in line, like that's fine. But if you have kicks available, you should be using them to move them off. Because
and the nice thing about lining as well is that lets all your kicks come back off cooldown. So you you're not going to run out of kicks at the end either.
Another place that I've seen it used that it should be like you should line Avatar in the Avatar Sethros room. The other place that I've seen it is Shrine of the Storm Bridge. Whenever Malthier's on the bridge area, you can snap Malthier to like one of the little goblet areas on the bridge as well. That can help. In addition to that, you can line at the little pillars at the very end, but you should be DPSing first and foremost, and then snapping / lining secondary.
Yeah, I mean,
there's also sorry, Darnus, go ahead.
No, you.
Well, I was gonna say there's also a hidden challenge with the Void Weaver activating the pillar part of it. Those scarabs spawn really spread out a lot of times. I actually think every time, but any tank that's not a prot warrior is going to have problems getting threat on all 5. There's usually at least 1 or 2 that are going to head towards someone and try to melee them. So if you aren't the tank, then try to stand right on the tank, let him generate some healing threat or damage threat. Either way he can, or she. And then once he has threat on the scarabs, then go in.
I'm a bad boy and I like to stand far away, but yeah, you should just be in melee. It's really easy. It's really easy to just stand in melee of the obelisk, the mob, and then let the flesh fiends / scarabs get into melee.
Yeah. I've still had like my Shadow Priest friend died the other day to a scarab, even though I was like actively protecting the group and trying to get threat on them as they run in from all sides. But he just like had some healing proc, like an impassive Visage proc. Any type of little healing threat like got him killed just because they spawn so spread out. It's really annoying.
I just try to knock the scarabs into the tank. That's normally what I go for, but I also don't like to just be in melee. It just tilts me because then I have to like run.
Yeah. Tettles remembers the last time he was in melee against God King Scovald.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a bad play for me to do it, but
yeah, you should probably be in melee.
I should be, but
all right, let's talk about the fear guy, Samrek, Beckoner of Chaos, with the Flesh Fiends spawn. So this is actually, I'd say one of the most deadly parts of this is actually those Flesh Fiends, not Samrek itself. There's a huge amount of damage you get. Okay, I almost sneezed. It's a huge amount of damage you get from That was close.
I was like, is he just gonna stop talking? I was like, what's happening?
I think he broke.
Man, that was really close. So you have the bleeds that those things stack up, which can be really, really deadly. One thing that you can do is when kiting, they'll bite the closest person, right? You can have like a rogue next to them with parry up to take the stacks, and that can let your tank reset their bleeds if they're living for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
That can be a move. And then I guess the other thing there is just who do you dispel when you have 3 of the debuffs going out and you only have 1 dispel generally, unless you're playing with, a mass dispel or imp dispel or something like that, kind of weird stuff. Revival, yeah. And the answer I think is the tank until it's just Samrek. Like as long as Flesh Fiends are out, you should be dispelling tank. Once Samrek is by itself, if the tank is 100% HP, you can let the tank get feared often and DPS or dispel DPS instead.
So the tank should be tanking the Flesh Fiends and Samrek in a stationary position. Like he should not be kiting until the Flesh Fiends are dead. And at that point, right, Samrek should probably be in like the 50 to 60% range. And then like the tank needs to move the mob, so he should be out of melee of Samrek, meaning that he does not need to get dispelled. He can just get feared away and be fine. So you should be tanking Samrek stationary, and then allowing your DPS to just crush the Flesh Fiends, and then you start kiting.
Mm-hmm. And
that's definitely the play.
If you do get 8 stacks and you need to kite, that's when like a rogue parry or like a AoE stun and everybody gets it away from them is the play. But if you can just kill them all before your tank dies, that's a good strategy also.
Something I've been doing lately as well is the more I fought it, the more I understand the timings of the bleeds. And if you time a good AoE stun, you can just drop stacks while still tanking the mobs. Like not only can you dodge the stacks as a brewmaster, but if you sweep like 2 seconds into your own bleed stacks from their initial cast, I think you have a almost guaranteed chance to drop and then reapply like the next stack of bleed. So you don't have 8, you only have 2.
I mean, I find it very infrequent that tanks even get up to 12 stacks. Like,
yeah, but if they do, it's bad news.
Yeah, they're dead.
Yeah.
All right. So that's our section on fighting the awakened enemies with their obelisks. One thing you'll notice from almost all of what we talked about is that aside from like the tank buster, kind of the biggest problem with each of these things is the armies that they bring. Well, maybe not the spider either, but like...
Hold on, wait, the tank buster's army also sucks. What up?
It does suck a little bit, but like the tank buster is, mostly the mob itself. But whereas like the Flesh Fiends and the tentacles, those eye stalks are pretty rough. But if you fight them with the final boss, you get the hidden benefit of not ever fighting those armies in Azoth, which don't give any count anyways. So it's inherently efficient to do this. Even in addition to getting to cleave the mob with the last boss, you also get the benefit of not spawning these hard enemies that don't give count, which is what you do when you go into the obelisk. So figuring out which awakened enemies you can fight with which bosses, there isn't a hard and fast rule, but it is, there are a lot of guidelines that we can give for which ones are worth fighting with which bosses. For the most part, on most dungeons, most weeks, it's usually a good idea to try and fight one awakened enemy with the last boss, I'd say, in a live key setting. Sometimes
it's always a time save in some way. Like just the fact that you don't have to fight the ads from the mini boss, like especially the eye stalks on the blob, is a huge time save.
I think, so for me personally, I think if you're not in voice, I don't know if I would recommend playing any of them.
Right. Yeah. If you're pugging, just do the 4 obelisks. That's what people are expecting. People are maybe not used to fighting awakened enemies at the last boss. Like maybe with the exception of like Freehold, where it's super free to do the spider with the last boss. Or like, Blob with last boss of Underrot, because it saves you so much time to not go and activate that obelisk. I would not worry about it in most of the other dungeons. I would just do the 4 obelisks.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that it is dungeon dependent. Most of these strategies are going to involve people being in voice, being able to communicate with one another, though.
Right. Yeah. That being said, this is one of the easiest ways to save 3 minutes off of your route is to fight one awakened enemy with the last boss. Maybe not 3 minutes, but 2 minutes, which can be pretty good. And sometimes it's even more than that because, like in the Underrot, if you're not going to that super awful, inefficient section of the dungeon, that saves you a lot more time as well. So let's go talk about what each of the different awakened enemies does when fighting with an end boss. So we'll start again with the Blood of the Corruptor. What are the bosses where fighting the Blood of the Corruptor is, a good play versus a bad play?
Yasma, it's good.
Do you want bosses or do you want like
General idea
situations?
works. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Yasma is like a good reason, and like basically all of the mobs that you would rather play the Blood of the Corruptor with, they have a lot of things in common. So one, like first and foremost, the boss room is going to be fairly open, and you're able to move consistently. You would never play Blood of the Corruptor with something like Overseer Corgus, for example. Like your movement is very restricted, and like you can't move on your own accord just because of the Heartstopper Venom. So you'd never play Blood of the Corruptor with Overseer Corgus. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. However, stuff like Yasma. Stuff like King Mechagon, stuff like that. Unbound Abomination is also a really good one that you can play Blood of the Corruptor with, very free.
Yeah,
all of those, yeah. Basically anything you can almost play Blood of the Corruptor with, straight up, as long as you can move freely.
It's one of the ones that requires...
Tool?
Yeah, Gorak Tool's a hard one.
Yeah, Gorak Tool and Harlan's Suite, just because of how teams do that room, is very frustrating because there's just limited amounts of space.
I would say that this is kind of one of the best ones to do outside of voice as well, because you don't really need to coordinate like kicks or dispels or anything. Like, yeah, you need some heads-up movement through the room, but I think that this is one of the easier ones to fight without being in voice with your team.
I would agree with that.
Okay, let's talk about the spider. Voidweaver Malthier. Tettles is a firm believer in never fighting the spider ever with end bosses.
I also have minute-long interrupt, right? I don't think it's never. I don't think it's never the case. I think it's really good in stuff like, is it a weak Motherload where the spider's down below?
Before the Azrak?
Yeah, basically if the spider is not the one that takes you into Rixa Fluxflame's room, if the spider is the one that takes you into Azrak's room, you play with Razdunk.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely a good play with the last boss Motherload. That's just like a 2 minutes bonus timer around the dungeon on that week for Motherload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, no, I have a minute-long kick, so my class kind of sucks. But that's a good point. Is like if you have a good comp for playing Voidweaver Malthier, such as 4 melee kicks, or hey, hot dog, we got a Restoration Shaman,
or a Protection Paladin. Protection Paladin makes that the freest obelisk in existence. Yeah, you can do it outside of voice comms even if you got a prop Paladin, they can just take every single kick, which does kind of own. But yeah, the normal comps with like one ranged. You know, Voidweaver Malthier is doable with last bosses, but I'd say being in voice is important because you don't really have any kicks to spare. And doing it with something like Yasma at that point starts being really hard because you have kicks from the main boss as well.
So I've had Malthier get caught into a 3 melee kick rotation before. I don't know why I've had it caught into a 3 melee kick rotation before. Almost all the time it's a 4 melee kick rotation. I don't know the logistics behind how it gets stuck in a 3 melee kick rotation sometimes.
So because someone kicked early. I think if you kick late consistently, it's almost always okay with 3 melee, and you can just use the range kick now and then as the backup.
Nah, we've had it where we kick at 0.5 seconds and it'll get caught it'll still be in a 4. Like I think there's something else to do with it, but I don't know what.
Different melee classes have different length lockouts as well. Like rogues have 4 seconds and some of the other ones have 3.
Yeah, true.
So that can be something that is relevant.
Yeah, I guess with the recent comp I've been playing with, it hasn't been a problem, but some groups may have a problem. You're right, Tuttles. But I think it is pretty free. Even if you have 3 melee kicks in one range, I don't think you have to let a kick go for like 10 casts.
Mm-hmm.
I think either way, like no matter what the comp is.
One tip is if you're gonna go. Okay.
I was gonna say it wouldn't go for. It'd be 12, wouldn't it? It'd be like 13 casts, I think. Right? Because it'd be like 3 rotations. Like yeah.
I didn't actually math it out.
The problem is if there is a kick on Yasma itself, where then one of your kicks is committed to that, and then you start missing like the 5th kick on the spider. My advice for that is just let the first cast through. Just let it, like a lot of times the very first cast on pull of bosses is not actually dangerous, and you can just let that through. And just start like aggressively letting it, instead of using interrupts on it, use stuff like Feign Death, Vanish, to handle it. Yeah, Spell Reflect, of course, very good to use on it as well. Those are pseudo kicks against Malthier as well.
You can also line of sight for something like Gorak Tool. So if you tank Gorak Tool up against the wall where the pillar spawns, your ranged players can actually line right there. So that's also very useful. I hate playing Spider on Gorak Tool, but again, I'm pretty sure it just comes down to Moon can interrupt.
All right, let's talk about the Tank Buster. This is one of the ones that I would almost never fight with end bosses on live keys. I think the exception can be Hunter and Warlock taunts make it a doable thing. But I think this is the one that scales the worst into high keys with end bosses.
I agree. I think it's very doable on MDI. The key level in MDI is 19, and so 100 pets can actually survive a melee, a spear breaker, and then another melee, I'm pretty sure, and still be alive to do their damage. But if the key gets up into like 22, 23 plus, I don't think the pet survives even a melee with the 50% turtle shell DR.
Yeah,
So it gets like really dangerous.
I guess it depends on the dungeon. So take Motherlode as an example. I actually have an opinion that I think that Urgroth is really good to play with final boss in Motherlode. And you like, so say you do have a hunter, dude, the hunter actually could just pet taunt every single one. And like, so fucking what if your hunter pet dies? Like, it sucks and you lose damage for it. If you're able to play Urgroth at the final boss, that's still more time efficient. Like, to be a pet res simulator than than to play it by itself, right?
I've been there. Yeah, your frenzy stacks just go 1 2 3 0 1 2 3 0.
I think it's definitely a good idea, and it saves a lot of time, but it has to be executed like perfectly, because once the key gets high enough, the hunter pet will taunt right before Spirit Breaker, but it'll also get meleeed right before Spirit Breaker, and it might just randomly get one shot by the melee, and then your tank takes it anyway, and you lose your damage.
Yeah, you can like taunt from, or you can have your tank like get away a little bit, and then just you can taunt right as Spirit Breaker's queued up, and that can avoid the melee thing. But
that's true. Definitely be sketchy. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it also, like, playing him with final boss also comes down to your tank's ability to be able to survive. I think since we're in a Prot Warrior meta, Prot Warrior's really fucking bad against tanking Spirit Breaker. I know Vengeance Demon Hunter can actually just face tank the whole entire thing, even through the debuff. Yeah. I don't know about how Brewmaster Monk is. I haven't played with one much this season.
Brew's really good solo against one mob like that, but when it's combined with other melee hits coming in, like, say, the last boss of King's Rest, where you're going to get hit by at least some of those things attacking you and only dodge a portion, it's going to like destroy you because you don't have any armor to make up for those melees you can't dodge.
Yeah, pretty good though. Probably last boss of Motherlode, right? Because you just have full elusive brawler. Like you never consume any elusive brawlers against that boss, right?
Well, those are magic damage and they hit you no matter what. On the very last boss of Motherlode. On Rix, though, would be really good, but those magic autos on Mogul will hit you for double damage during the Spirit Breaker debuff every time.
Okay, actually.
But that being said, you can kite the boss away from where the Spirit Breaker guy spawns, and it'll line up for like the first 2 Spirit Breaker casts where the boss will just be doing the Gallon Gun during the debuff for the like full duration of the debuff, and you won't take any extra damage.
I still think Razdunk is like the only one that's really feasible on. I think people are not really committed to playing it on Razdunk. Granted, this would be... I would not recommend doing this in like a pug or like a less coordinated group. This is something that if you were very skilled, I could see somebody doing that in like a really high key if they really need to time it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's talk about Samrak, Beckoner of Chaos. So this is the fear guy. Honestly, something that I think is also underplayed on end bosses. My favorite thing about this is that like most groups have a way to handle the first set of fears, the second set of fears even, and you kill it before the third and you're chilling, right? Or you take the third and it's kind of bad, but like, you know, the hard part's over by then. I think that like, you know, something like Revival, Mass Dispel, just individual immunities and defensives, Prot Warrior, you know, fear immune plus their shield wall or whatever, and you're chilling against this.
I agree. I think we were talking about this before the show, where it's just kind of hard to coordinate that, especially in a Taldazar, where the fear boss would be the better choice than the kick boss on the B rotation, I think. But that would require the group to go into the pillar next to Volcall, and then you'd have to change the whole strat and find a way to like pull both honor guards away, get in the obelisk, change the whole route as you have to go up to Volcall and then back down as well without taking a pillar into there. It gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, I actually like playing him with Yasma. I also don't mind playing him with Unbound Abomination.
Yes, I agree there as well. That like, I mean, part of that is just that it's such a good obelisk to skip when it is the A pattern in Underrot. And yeah, it's like the thing to know about it is you're always getting feared directly away from wherever Samrak is. So if you're thinking about that, it's usually pretty possible to not fear yourself into something bad.
That's the important point. I think that this one has the exact same coordination level as probably Voidweaver Mouthier, where it's like it's way easier if you're in voice and you know who's getting dispelled and who has immunities up and whatnot. So you know if you're actually going to be getting feared, you know if there may be a potential overlap that you need to defensive through. I think you just kind of need to be aware, and I think it comes with being in voice, it comes with communication, it comes with time. I think, dude, Samrek is criminally underplayed there with final bosses. He's really not that bad.
I agree.
Yeah,
he melees pretty hard though.
He does kind of slap your tank around. That is not to be underestimated.
Oh, you know what? I was going to say the same thing about the blob. The blob actually melees pretty hard too. And I think if you have the choice in some dungeons where both the kick mini boss and the blob are good choices for the last boss, you should choose the blob. Like King's Rest is the one that comes to mind. I think having the blob melees on top of the blade combo for most tanks is too much, and you'd rather have the kick obelisk instead.
Okay, so you do the blob and fight the spider with the last boss?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Yeah, King's Rest is a good example where you actually there's a lot. You can kind of use any of those obelisks or skip any one of them, any of the 4.
I mean, in the same way that the blob is good because the blob is good because it's easy to move. Like Void Weaver Mouthier is bad because it's hard to move. And like, say she gets locked, like if she gets stuck out in the middle of the room, say she gets stuck in like the Unbound Abomination puddles or like the Harlan Sweet puddles or something like that, and she's just forever away from the rest of your group. What the hell are you going to do about that? You have like to trek through that to be able to kick her? No, she's going to get 2 casts off and maybe wipe you.
Does depend a little bit on your comp there. Like if you have like, you know, DH kick, DK kick, rogue who can run in and kick from pretty far away and has cloak or whatever, all those sorts of things make it a lot more doable than if you're looking there with like arms warrior kick and you're just like, I need to get right next to the thing.
Yeah, if you have like DK, Demon Hunter, or a bunch of range, like DK or Demon Hunter, I guess are notable ones because they're ranged melee kicks, right? Or Shaman kick also.
All right. I think that about does it here for our main topic. We can advance to some related questions though about the obelisk, which I think is or about these obelisks. So first one comes from Lufer in Discord, who asks, "Can you kill the blob without killing tentacles? Or do you stay in combat with them until they're dead?" Any takers?
Well, it used to be the case where you just have a rogue go into the obelisk first, run all the tentacles away, and then vanish it, and then you just kill the blob, and that's it. But they fixed that early in the patch, and so now the blobs, or the tentacles and the slime, just put anyone in the realm with them in combat like every few seconds or so, I think.
And that's why whenever I was talking about the Toldegor thing, where everybody can be in the room with, like in the obelisk room, and like the rogue can spawn the blob on the far side of the room, vanish off the tentacles immediately teleport to the other 4 players. That's how that's possible because everybody's global combated, like Charles just stated.
Yeah, it's not something you can realistically do is avoid fighting those enemies. Really, the only way is to like get pulled out of Nyalotha by somebody pulling a boss. That can let you skip the tentacles.
Do you think that's viable for a live key strat?
Like kill the blob, leave the tentacles, and leave somebody in the real realm to pull the boss?
Yeah, that's a good point. You can CC them. You can like para and blind tentacles, right?
Yeah.
I was more referring to the concept of like have one of your players out of the realm, you use the obelisk to move around freely, then that one player pulls your group mates out of the realm, but you actually just don't kill the obelisk. Do you think that's like a thing for a live piece?
I think that could be real, especially if you're playing without a rogue. It's budget shroud. As long as you have somebody who does have stealth, like a druid or a hunter or whatever.
You know, you can do that in Motherload if you want to do the kick out with the last boss. You just use the obelisk to get to the. I mean, if you have a shroud, it doesn't really matter. I guess if you don't have a rogue and you just have a resto druid, you could do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which, you know, rogues are pretty popular in live keys right now because of how much utility they bring. That's pretty useful for moving around dungeons. But if you're trying to push without one, I think that kind of strategy is a really useful thing to have up your sleeve.
I mean, rogue I think is also popular because a lot of really good players rerolled to rogue at some point. I think it's a two-pronged like thing where like if the expansion started right now and people had to pick a class, I don't think that many people would pick rogue right now, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, next question comes from Rylera in Discord. Is it better to snap the tentacles or just kill them where they start? I feel like every time we try to snap, it goes poorly because I get a little behind and suddenly I've got 4 targeting me while I'm trying to run through the goo. I believe it is better to snap them, but you need to make sure that you don't that everybody is moving together, and nobody falls behind.
Yeah. If there's any hero in the group, they're going to get screwed. They shouldn't do it. They should just move with the group, even if their class loses a little bit of damage from moving.
What Tettle said though when we were actually talking about this, I want to reiterate the strategy of having one person enter the obelisk first, snap the tentacles by themselves, and then the rest of your group comes in and goes and kills them. Can be a really, really good way to manage those.
I think it saves you more time than it costs you by 5 people not being able to enter the realm for 5 seconds, or 4 people not being able to enter the realm for 5 seconds.
I agree.
All right, next question comes from @BradDavis6 on Twitter. This one is, what do you guys think of removing Tyrannical and Fortified? All right, I like where this is going. And putting the obelisk's baseline with different obelisk bosses each season.
So that'd be Awakened being always a seasonal fix, right?
Yeah, I think that Awakened is cool, but I think I'm gonna be okay with it. You know, as long as there's not, as long as we don't get a new infested. I don't think that we need Awakened to always be active. I do think removing Tyrannical and Fortified good though.
Depending on the next seasonal fix, I'll either really like Awakened or I'll have a pleasant memory but dislike it.
Yeah, you know. If we get infested back, I'm gonna be pining for the days of Awakened for sure.
Well, Awakened is good for a lot of groups that don't run with a rogue, right? Mm-hmm. I guess it kind of depends on the dungeons. From what we've seen from Halls of Atonement and from
Necrotic Wake,
I don't know if you necessarily need a rogue. I think an Invis pot would be more than sufficient.
Right? Yeah, Halls of Atonement in particular looks like rogue not required at all. Necrotic Wake,
Halls
I could
of
see
Atonement
it being good.
So, like, after the first boss in Halls of Atonement, how you have to get into the manor, I could see Shroud being pretty good, but, like, you could just Invis pot there and probably be fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Rogue is going to be good. Like, Shroud is really strong without Awakened. But I don't, like, I think that Awakened being permanent is not what we need, really. I do think, though, that finding a way to get rid of Tyrannical and Fortified would be good. So,
yeah.
Like that.
They sounded like they weren't going to do that, though, right? From that Ian interview?
Yeah, it sounds like Tyrannical and Fortified are here to stay, right?
Feels bad, man.
Feels bad, man.
Feels bad, man.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Any questions from Twitch chat we want to yoink in here?
Yeah, we got one about Mac Dragon 26. If you could relocate any of the obelisks in Natal, where would you move them? Okay, so I would take the double Honor Guard Yasma obelisk, because I kind of hate where that is. And I would move that... where the hell would I even move that?
I would put that at the bottom of the stairs where the 4-pack is after Priestess, or before Priestess, depending on the order. You know,
okay.
Like right where you open the gate up to go out to the Sards. I think a pillar there would be good to give you the option of doing Sards or skipping them depending on the affixes.
Yeah, okay. And then I would also move the other one that's in the other Honor Guard pack, and I would move it... 5 yards back towards the starting zone, so you could actually click it without engaging the fucking Witch Doctor pack.
Yes. Oh my god.
Or ideally, I put it on the stairs. That's like right there.
I would take the 2 obelisks on the sides, and I would put them, by the stairs that you open the gates at for each of their sides. Oh. And then I would take the one by the double Honor Guard pack, and I'd put it right at the start of the dungeon.
Trying with the 600 IQ, moving that one that's in the corner with the double Honor Guard, moving it down to the bottom with the Hex Priest pack would actually be the play, because then you could get into Volkal's area regardless of which direction you came through.
Yeah, that because right now it's like they're no matter what pathing you want to do in a Taltazar, there's 2 obelisks you don't want to activate at least, often 3, and it's really rough. Okay, I think that about does it for our show this week. This is, I think, a pretty fun one. Let us know what you thought of this topic, of course.
I think we got another one.
Oh, we do?
Really
okay.
Good question. Do you think there is any dungeon plus a fixed combination that warrants 2 obelisks on the last boss in live keys? Warrants it? Probably not. I don't think you need to do it to time it. I think there are some that are easier than others. I think if you Sam. Okay, so Fear plus Blob on Yasma is actually pretty free as long as your tank can live.
Yeah, so this is like fortified only. I think Freehold's another case where like you can do Spider plus Fear or something on Harlan pretty easy, because Harlan doesn't really do abilities above 60. But yeah,
Underrot with B rotation, Spider and Blob, that's probably pretty free. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I've done that actually.
That's a good one.
That's not bad. So yes, I think definitely options.
I just don't think people are willing to commit the time it takes to be able to learn 2 obelisks, because it's so niche to be able to to be able to like need that for time to be able to like even complete the key in time. Plus the opportunity cost is like free movement around the instance, and that's pretty underrated.
All right, another question I saw here, which actually is a pretty common question, but we haven't talked about it in a little while, so take it again. From Riddick Gaming, what do you think if Keystone stopped having a fixed rotation and instead each Keystone has different affixes? That way there aren't the weeks where nobody does keys. This one is, so if you've ever been on Tournament Realm and done like MDI practice, you've had this experience of like swapping between different maps and doing different affixes on each one, and it's like, it's really hard actually to do that. It's really, you know the first week or the first key of each week where you have to like remember, okay, it's bolstering, okay, it's sanguine or whatever, and you wiped that affix once or twice because you forgot that affix was active. That would be every key if they were not set for the whole week. So I think that the week affixes being set on a weekly level is actually really good, and it would be chaos. It would be very very chaotic if it was random per keystone.
I think whenever we first started doing this podcast about a year ago at this point, I had the opinion of like, I don't like rotations. Key push week RNG is really bad. I think that the longer time goes on, the more I'm like okay with it, because I do see the side of it where it's like the weekly rotation is fairly fine the way it is because casual players only play one key a week, and it keeps the dungeons fresh for them in some regards.
I think that there is a problem with the like push week, dead week mentality. I agree with that. But that is just because there's no incentive. Like the only incentive you have to push keys is from score that can be earned only on the good weeks, right? Like if you pushed last week and you're pushing this week, you're not earning any score this week. And if you push next week, you're earning score again next week. So it's, there's no incentive to go on weeks where the affixes are harder, but Blizzard Entertainment could just give us an incentive to play on weeks when the affixes are, if there was just like, the top runs of a certain week got, rewards of some kind in game, then all of a sudden there's no dead weeks anymore. It's everybody's playing every week.
I'm still of the opinion that deleting keys in season 1 was the best accidental thing they ever did to the game. And that made it incredibly more fun to do keys on any given week, because you could basically discover a dungeon like in Hearthstone and get one of 5 keys that you wanted out of the end of any given dungeon that you did.
Okay, so I think the counterpoint for them is like they want you to have to do even sometimes the dungeons that you don't really want to do, like the Siege of Boralus and the King's Rest. But what they really don't understand is that I'm willing to kick somebody out of my group to where I no longer have a Siege of Boralus or a King's Rest in my group anymore.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that is so shit. Like, those dungeons are just so fucking not fun to play. Okay, not King's Rest. King's Rest is actually okay this season. Siege of Boralus is fucking bad.
What's the worst dungeon this season? I think it's Atal.
Atal is the one that is the sleeper.
So fucking hard.
Yeah, it's sleeper difficult. Like, the 30-minute timer in there is also the one that has scaled up the hardest with 4 extra awakened enemies in, right? Because, they take a fixed amount of time, then there's less total time in Atal.
Well, I mean, you were just skipping the shit in Atal before. Like, you weren't even playing the hard shit. Now you have to, like, fucking... Like, the optimal pathing is taking the blob up to Priestess Alunza, which you don't need to do that. That's not, like, that time efficient over just, like, not even playing those mobs and just going up the right side. You didn't play fucking beguiling mobs in Atal. Like, there was none that you played.
Yeah. Not on the push week. On Enchanted week, yeah.
Okay, sorry. There was one Void Emissary on the bridge. There was
you can skip that
too. Emissary near the double bird, and honestly, you can skip both of those.
Yep.
It's true.
All right. That's going to do it for us this week, though. We'll be back next week with another Titanforge, and then I think the week after that we might be able to go back to weekends. So we'll see if that's the plan, or is it the week after? It would be the week after the week after. I don't know. At some point we'll go back to usual time, maybe. So thanks everybody for hanging out. Later.